Hello, and thanks so much for joining us on our special program on China's annual political season, Global Lens, the two sessions. I'm Zhong Shi.
And I'm Li Qiuyuan. As China's annual sessions of its top legislature and political advisory body are underway in Beijing, deputies and members from all walks of life are gathering for these events, a critical window into China's development roadmap for 2025.
In our program today, we'll invite guests from across the globe to share their insights on China's social and economic development.
And you know what, Zhong, tech innovation has been a hot topic this year. During the two sessions, we've seen a lot of buzz around robots, AI-related products, and breakthroughs such as DeepSeek. And now my colleague, Erhard Vermak, has asked DeepSeek about the 10 most discussed topics and will break down for us. Erhard, tell us all about it.
Thanks, Qiuyuan and Zhong Shi. So as you said there, China's cutting-edge AI model, DeepSeek, isn't just making waves, it's practically stealing the show at this year's two sessions. Policymakers can't stop mentioning it, so we decided to get in on the action. Using DeepSeek's analysis of global media buzz, we're unveiling the top 10 keywords shaping the narrative worldwide around China's key political event. Let's take a look at some of them right now. China's GDP growth target leads the charge, as that number signals the country's overall economic outlook. This year, the number has been maintained at around 5% for 2025 by the National People's Congress. Then, tech innovation and AI are clear frontrunners, where China isn't just keeping up, it's setting the pace. From AI breakthroughs to semiconductor advancements, all eyes are on how Beijing's policies will drive the next wave of tech dominance. Following that, we have new quality productive forces, which are helping the country grow faster and smarter. High-tech industries, green energy, and the digital transformation are at the core of China's new economic engine. And speaking of new frontiers, the low-altitude economy is also taking off. Literally. DeepSeek's global media heat map shows drone networks and urban air taxis are attracting plenty of interest. With China investing heavily in the sector, could the sky become the new economic highway? And rounding out our selection, we have opening up. Here, China's message is clear. The door is and will always remain open to friends across the globe. Now, that AI crunch data is backed up by real-world international media attention on China's significant annual political event. Bloomberg describes China's 5% economic growth target as bullish, especially amid ongoing tensions with the US. A Bloomberg report suggests China may introduce additional stimulus measures later this year to boost growth. Then, The Guardian highlights China's economic growth goal while also covering the defense spending. It says China will increase military expenditure by 7.2% this year, matching last year's figure. The report adds that China spends less than 2% of its GDP on defense, significantly lower than the US, which allocates over 3% of its GDP to military spending. The Straits Times of Singapore focuses on China's foreign diplomacy, covering key points from Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's press conference. The report quotes Wang's remarks, including, China will provide certainty to this uncertain world and that Taiwan has never been a country. Telesur, headquartered in Venezuela, covers Chinese-US relations, quoting Foreign Minister Wang Yi's comment that respect is a prerequisite for China-US relations and that no country should fantasize that it can suppress China and maintain good relations with the country at the same time. And then ENCA News of South Africa reports on China's technological progress, quoting a senior official who says Chinese AI company DeepSeek's success shows China's ability to innovate. That report notes that shares of Chinese tech giants have surged in recent weeks following DeepSeek's launch. And with that, it's back to you.
Here Art Vermont reporting live in our studio this hour with the help of DeepSeek, of course. Julian, I do have a feeling that DeepSeek is pretty spot on with what is being hotly discussed at the two sessions this year. But you know what? Let's find out more from someone who's actually covering the two sessions for us. Joining us in the studio are my colleague Sean Calebs, correspondent for CGTN America, and Zun Ahmed Han, research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. Fantastic to have both of you joining us on our special program today. Sean, how much did DeepSeek get right about the topics, the hotly discussed topics of the two sessions this year? And since this isn't your first time covering the two sessions, what exactly caught your eye?
Yeah, 10th trip to China, third time covering two sessions. I think DeepSeek is right on point. I think everybody's talking about the growth projection coming out of there. But I think that from my perspective, coming here each time I cover it, from an outsider, it can be somewhat challenging to learn your way around the system. And I think each time I come, I learn more and more. And I've come to really look forward to the work report, which shows where China has been, and more importantly, a roadmap of where it's going to go and how it's going to navigate certain hurdles, whether they're internal or the external pressures that we talked about, we've heard so much about. And secondly, the foreign minister's news conference. That is always, he is the consummate diplomat. He's someone. How many U.S. Secretary of States have come and gone since Wang Yi has been there? And he's so respected internationally, and he speaks so eloquently, says a lot with a few words, 23 questions in 90 minutes. To me, that was very fascinating to watch and hear what he had to say. And a lot of people are talking about the Trump administration. I can tell you people at home still are trying to figure out what exactly is going on. So I can imagine how difficult it is and the pressure that it is putting not only on China, but the global economy. So seeing how two sessions is dealing with this, the things that it can control, whether it be purchasing among citizens in China, the employment, the housing issue that has really haunted the country for so long. They have plans. China has plans to deal with these. What they don't know, of course, is what the administration is going to do. And we're going to hear more about that.
Definitely. And Zun, what about you? What has been the highlight from this year's two sessions? What moment or announcement has left the deepest mark?
Wow, I think there's just so much that's been happening. These developments are, again, the world is watching the two sessions with a lot of intent and expectation. So if I have to, in a nutshell, I completely resonate with what Sean said. I was also here for the foreign minister's press conference. And for me, as someone who's understanding China's foreign policy, China's engagement with the world, that was obviously, a very enlightening and also something we expect from a diplomat and also a foreign minister such as Wang Yi. I think, key takeaways. Number one, let's not forget that when 4 years ago, at the peak of COVID and uncertainty, there was an expectation that in the next 3 to 4 years, China might be less open to the world. We see the exact opposite throughout the two sessions and also with the foreign policy roadmap that was also mentioned by your colleague. There is an openness and also a sense of, adding certainty to an uncertain world is not just a slogan. This is the reality of China's role in the world today. The commitments under the Belt and Road Initiative, Global Development Initiative, all of that is obviously as expected and only expanding. And at the same time, the developed countries and especially the Global South developing countries can look forward to deeper engagement, learning, bilateral, relations further expanding, and seeing their own economies move forward with China's support. I'll also quickly add that there is the balance that the two sessions, exhibit is very important. By balance, I mean, on the one hand, we are talking about 6G, high tech, and all of that. And at the same time, it's very down to earth. The topic of rural revitalization, development, well-being of ordinary people, a balance between urban and rural is something that all countries can learn from. It is something that many of the most developed countries, they overlook these down-to-earth realities. So there's a lot more, but I think these two are definitely important.
Absolutely.
takeaways.
You can really get a sense of how China's planning to balance its domestic development priorities with its global responsibilities from those meetings, important press conference.
Absolutely, Chiu Yuan. And now we're also joined by Mr. Aizaz Ajar, Director of Strategy and Partnership at the Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute. Sir, welcome to our program today. One of the most important parts of the government work report is China's economic growth target for 2025, set around 5%. And our correspondent mentioned just now, China will have to accomplish that target against both external pressures and domestic challenges. Can I get your thoughts on that growth target and what China's continuous growth will mean for the world?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So let's look a bit at China's 5% GDP target. I think it's very bullish, very optimistic, but I also think it's quite realistic in that sense, because at the end, what we have to send to the market right now, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of things that we don't really know what's going to happen. I think it's really a push for stability and resilience. Now, despite this, trade tensions out there, there are a bunch of things that are going on, but I think this really showcases, China's commitment to maintain that steady economic shape. China is ASEAN's largest trade partner. I think it's about $700 billion, right? And so a couple of things come to mind when you talk about how we're going to set it moving forward. The first thing is we have to ensure that there's supply chain stability, and that's very, very important. China remains a very, very critical node in global manufacturing, right? And if China is stable, basically everything else around the area will kind of stabilize as well. The second thing we're looking at is a push towards ASEAN. So there are some complexities in the United States right now. There are some complexities in Europe, and we see a major shift and excitement coming towards Southeast Asia, right? And once again, as one of our largest trading partners, right? I think there's a chance to boost economies, right? And boost the region through China's push in technology. We've seen China do so many things. There's something that it's called experimental advanced superconducting tokamak. I mean, they sustained nuclear fusion for like 17 minutes. That's something really, really big, right? And so the push towards green technology, I think this is a very, very good market story. I think it's very realistic, and investor confidence, and we'll come back.
And Mr. Azhar, China says it will pursue high-quality opening up and strengthen policy to stabilize foreign investment and trade. What sort of opportunities as well as challenges do you foresee for foreign companies operating in the Chinese market?
So the biggest challenge operating in Chinese market, that really three things. Number one is, distance. We're not physically near to China. The second thing is the culture. And the third thing is really just technology. I would say the language. Now, here's what's very interesting. If we can break down that language element, if we can break down the communication element, half the battle is won. And this can be done, and I believe, through artificial intelligence. We've spoken a bit about DeepSeek and how DeepSeek really changed the market. And it caused a $2 trillion sell-off in the US, but it's open source and anybody can use it. So artificial intelligence is probably going to reach a level where I may not have to speak in Mandarin. You may not have to speak in Bahasa Malaysia to me. We can use our own native language and communicate. Now, moving towards that, right, I think there are great opportunities for growth within technology, within green energy, but it all falls down, if you ask me. It's about creating talent, right? It's about creating talent that is ready for Southeast Asia, talent that's ready for China. I think within the technology space, within the artificial intelligence space, we don't have a common framework, right? Can we get that together? Could China, possibly work together with ASEAN to create a more harmonized system of how we could do business together? I think that's very, very important. And on top of that as well, just as a bit of a side note, right? The creation of talent, I think, is going to be paramount. I was at the Belt and Road Summit sometime last year. We spoke about infrastructure. We spoke about big investments. We spoke about changing the world through the Belt and Road Initiative. And I think a push towards talent is very, very important, especially talent that understands how it is to do business in this region.
All right, Mr. Aizaz Azhar, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate your analysis. China's business partners are closely watching the ongoing proceedings. CGTN's Erhard Vermak spoke to Lorenzo Riccardi, chairman of the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce, about his organization's key takeaways from this year's meetings and the emerging sustainable business opportunities.
I believe that from the government work report announced by Premier Li Qiang, it is clear how China is promoting a stable growth with a kind of policy that, of course, is promoting foreign investments, is promoting bilateral trade with countries like Italy, but is also stable in its policies and target. We saw a very similar target compared to the previous year. So we consider this for the long term can be an advantage for Italian companies. interested in coming back to China or starting a new project. So we are very interested to see all implementing regulation and to evaluate incentive policies and advantages for European and Italian companies interested in this market.
Is there an opportunity for China and Italy or China and Europe to collaborate on green technologies, the environment, as the world sometimes oscillates between wanting to do more and wanting to maintain the status quo?
From a political perspective, the recent months saw an increase in official visits and missions from Italy to China and from China to Italy. And in July 2024 has been signed in Beijing a 3 years action plan between Premier Meloni and Premier Li Qiang. This focuses on 6 areas of cooperation, including trade, finance, healthcare, innovation, sustainability, and culture. So sustainability is a key focus between the two governments to promote new cooperation. In this regard, one aspect that I want to highlight, because also the Italian Chamber worked together with the Italian Trade Agency in Guangzhou, specifically in southern China, on the automotive sector. I'm talking about specifically the electric vehicle market. We consider that, of course, China is the #1 market, is the #1 producer, and is promoting fast this new trend in electric vehicles. So we consider that small, medium-sized enterprises from Italy can bring value to the supply chain also of the electric vehicle market in China. So we believe this is a practical field where the Italian expertise, the quality of made in Italy, can also cooperate with China in the largest market, entering this domestic supply chain.
We also spoke to journalists from Serbia and Spain for their impressions of this year's 2 sessions.
We heard from Chinese Prime Minister discussing China's economic and development goals, including a GDP growth target of 5%. That is something that is going to stay unchanged from the previous year, given the rapid and significant geopolitical shifts, especially following the announcement from the new American administration. China's projection of stable GDP growth, inflation, and unemployment levels suggests that it does not expect that that is going to have strong effects from geopolitical changes.
The key points of interest are for China to be perceived as a partner who's going to be looking for its objectives or targets, but that those objectives are not going to be against, or they're not going to be detrimental to the culture of Spain or the European culture.
The private sector has been an important driver of China's economic growth, and this year's government report highlights even greater support for its development. Statistics show China's private sector contributes over 60% of the country's GDP. It also accounts for more than 80% of urban employment. In manufacturing, for example, private businesses make up over 96% of all manufacturing companies in China. The private sector provides nearly half of the country's foreign trade. It also plays a key role in boosting China's high-tech and emerging industries. The share of private businesses in the scientific research and technical services sector has risen from 91.9% in 2019 to more than 94%. And over 70% of technological innovations are contributed by the private sector.
And let's talk about exactly this with Zun Ahmed Han and Sean Calebs in our studio. Zun, China has introduced a series of measures to support the private sector. And make no mistake, it's not a sudden pivot to the private sector. China has always been supportive for the healthy development of private enterprises, given that they're the one creating jobs and spearheading technological innovation. What do you make of these measures? Will they be effective? How important is the development of the private sector at this time in the Chinese economy?
I think, absolutely. Also, the statistics that you mentioned are a very important eye-opener for especially outsiders who don't realize how dynamic and central the private sector is for Chinese cities and for the Chinese economy. And I think recently we have seen so many developments and also the investment in, favorable policies, also seeing different provinces who are encouraging domestic policies to boost the private sector. I think all of this is obviously, as you mentioned, part of a trajectory, an ongoing trajectory. And I think, it's also essential because a lot of foreign investors are looking at the private sector and how it is flourishing in China, the direction it's going in, to think about, what are the opportunities for them to invest in China. It is also attracting a lot of foreign labor from all parts of the world to become part of, private companies and get this kind of experience and exposure in a very dynamic economy. So I think, the measures introduced are obviously central to continuing this trajectory. I think also the fact that high-tech, green, all of these aspects are priorities for the government, and we have seen new quality productive forces, for example, them in application. All of this comes together to see a sector that is not only relevant today or in 2 years, but hopefully for the next 5-10 years becomes a trendsetter. And that is the aspect, China becoming a trendsetter is not a very old phenomenon. It's in recent years that we just realized China is definitely raising the bar globally and attracting global talent. So I feel we can see more momentum in this direction.
Yeah, you can see there's a strategic shift from technology catch-up to innovation leadership. And speaking of technology, Sean, the government is playing a strong emphasis on developing these emerging industries, often referred to as the new quality productive forces. So we're talking about industries like low-altitude economy or commercial aerospace or quantum computing, pharmaceutical. What are your thoughts on these new concepts?
And 6G, yeah.
And 6G as well, yeah.
I think it's getting a great deal of attention, especially from overseas. I think that the United States has been watching what's been going on here. And there's a lot of excitement, I think, globally, especially when you talk about the commercial aerospace. That is an area that I think is so ripe for growth because there's such a demand. And if you look at what has happened with both the Biden administration and the Trump administration, they've had a crackdown on providing high-tech chips. And we heard Wang Yi said it's arrogant to think that one nation can control another nation's growth. And so China is simply working basically around it. It has continued to grow. It has continued to reach new heights with its technology and hasn't been slowed by this. And I had the chance to meet one of the real special CEOs and entrepreneurs in China this past week, Dongming Zhu. I was at the gathering at 2 sessions, and I was in a scrum trying to get an interview. She saw the piece we did, reached out and said, "I'd like to talk to you." So we sat down and talked last night. And her company, Glee, with its strength in refrigeration, air conditioning, but the innovation that it takes to become the world leader in that. She's one tough cookie, and more than 1,000 patents that company has right now. So innovation is really going to continue to drive China. The unknown, of course, in all this, once again, is how the administration in Washington, D.C. is going to continue to deal with this. Are they going to try to throw up more barriers? But it's interesting to see as the United States pursues this isolationism, if you will, China is just reaching out more and more and more and more. And with all these innovations they have, you need to have that output. And with the Belt and Road and with the various trade measures they have with the Global South and many other nations, Europe being a good friend as well, that is there and that growth is there, and I think it's going to continue.
Yeah, those cutting-edge technologies, they could be the things that could reshape China's economic landscape and its global competitiveness.
Yeah, all right. China's GDP grew by 5% in 2024 with a similar target set for this year. The country will also push for more private sector development. I talked to Dr. Urs Lustenberger, president of Swiss Chan Asia, and a professor at Singularity Academy, an innovative educational institute in Switzerland. He says China's economic goals will provide much-needed confidence and stability for international businesses. China has again set a new economic growth target of around 5% for this year, similar to what China achieved in 2024. You mentioned confidence in the Chinese economy. I wonder how that confidence translates into business opportunities and business sentiments for Swiss companies operating here in China.
We could see that China shows a stable growth environment. That means the economic opportunities will be forecastable. This will help, looking from a Swiss perspective, to our big players that are active in China, for example, in pharmaceuticals, be it Roche, be it Novartis. It will help our finance industry that is present with UBS, and it will help our big manufacturers such as ABB, Nestle, and Bühler. And I believe that stability encourages them to stay on the ground. They see that consumer demand is likely to grow as well. I believe also nominal available income of the population will slightly go up, which will help our luxury brands, our precision engineering, our clean energy companies, and so on. So I believe all those that have been present in China have reason to be confident that the journey will go on.
Switzerland was the first continental European country to sign a free trade agreement with China. How has this agreement benefited Swiss businesses in general over the years? And what other areas of cooperation, deeper cooperation, do you see going forward?
Well, first of all, the signing of that free trade agreement made Switzerland feel special in its relationship to China. And this is trade expansion and tariff reduction. And in nowadays world, it sounds a little bit funny to talk about tariff reductions, but that's what the world was all about. And Switzerland, of course, has benefited from that. Look, going forward, of course, there is talk about trying to improve that cooperation and maybe modernize the free trade agreement. And I believe there would be room for that. And I think the two countries are currently in negotiations, and I'm quite positive that these negotiations will be resolved in the near future.
China continues to place innovation in science and technology as a key priority in its development agenda. Our Ida Waringa gives you an immersive tour of China's recent advancements and a first-hand look at robots in our studio.
Well, China has been turbocharging its innovation engine for years, with its R&D spending reaching 2.68% of GDP in 2024. And its investment in innovation is paying off in a big, big way, fueling breakthrough after breakthrough. Last year, China's first domestically designed and built deep ocean drilling vessel, the Mangxiang, or Dream in English, made waves as it ventured into the mysteries of the deep ocean. And the Fujian, China's homegrown aircraft carrier, took to the seas for its maiden voyage, marking a major milestone in national defense. And look over there, another giant product made in and by China. Since its commercial debut in 2023, the C919, China's first domestically developed large passenger jet, has already completed over 1 million passenger trips. And that's not all. In the far reaches of space, the Chang'e 6 lunar probe has successfully collected samples from the far side of the moon, delivering this unique cosmic parcel back to Earth. A true testament to China's growing technological independence. And while the country is making bold strides towards becoming technologically self-sufficient in traditional sectors, the explosive growth of humanoid robots also represents a standout transformation in the country's tech innovation landscape. And on that note, I would like to bring in a new friend from the future, powered by AI. Welcome to our studio, and a very firm handshake to boot. And our new friend from the future is joined by its pet dog, as you can see. And the pet dog literally has a bunch of tricks up its sleeve. Well, the robots are being fine-tuned for agility, and their versatile applications are becoming increasingly evident across a wide range of scenarios. As you can see, walking, welding, washing dishes, and in this case, one day, maybe even helping out with the scripts. Well, featuring advanced AI, these robots are adaptable to ever more sectors, from manufacturing to healthcare, education, and scientific exploration. Well, I must say it's an absolutely fantastic time here in studio. We are literally looking at the future. All right, my new friend and the pet dog, thanks for being in studio with us. Bye-bye. Well, earlier I talked to Sophie Schmidt, who is a young global leader at the World Economic Forum and founder of Rest of the World, a publication covering technology developed outside of the West. We spoke about the current state of world technology and what lies ahead.
You know, DeepSeek came in, totally shocked the world earlier on in 2025. In January, later on, by the end of that month, it had surpassed ChatGPT as the most downloaded on iOS. So what are your thoughts on DeepSeek and its impact right now in tech?
You know, I think DeepSeek and R1 in particular was an earthquake. It was a real wake-up call for the rest of the world. And so DeepSeek was impressive on a cost basis alone, but the fact that they made it open source really changed the game for, I think, AI entrepreneurs all over the world. All sorts of countries saw that moment and think, aha, we can also participate and we don't have to make the same compromises or the same types of alliances that we might otherwise have to. Things are possible. So I think it was a real win for the open source community in that respect. We've been reporting on Chinese technology for 5 years, for as long as the publication's been alive. I used to work in China, so I know how talented China's engineers are, not just in AI, but in every form of technology you can imagine. Chinese engineering leads the world in so many capacities. So it's not surprising that their AI model, especially having to work around restrictions, around chips and talent, that they would be able to produce something that was as valuable, as competitive, as capable, and as affordable as what they've done. So I think it's now, game is in a new place, and I think that's really exciting for most of the world at this time.
A lot of these developing countries are looking to China as a leader in technology. So how best do you think China can develop or, you know, try to fill some of these technological disparities and gaps in the global south?
Well, to give credit where it's due, I think they already are. You know, the Belt and Road Initiative is an enormous driver of infrastructure and change and investment. People have very different experiences across those projects, so I won't identify them. But, you know, I think on an infrastructure level, China is playing an enormous role in getting people access to power, getting access to telecommunications, all the backbone stuff that you would need just to get started in the first place. I think that's happening. I also think that the Chinese tech sector is unusually good at making affordable hardware and software. You know, I used to work for Xiaomi a long time ago, and at the time it was a small startup, you know, affordable smartphone player, and here it is making cars. The ability of Chinese companies to not only create really good quality products, but also make them affordable and make them at scale, I think is really probably the most important factor. I always liked a story of a phone company called Transsion. Transsion is a Shenzhen-based smartphone company, which briefly was the #1 African sales smartphone in the world, I think in 2017, 2018, because they had showed up in a couple of African markets and they had listened to the users. What a radical thought. And they were able to build features that the users in these African markets simply hadn't had because no one had tried to build anything for them. And if it existed, it was too expensive. So they came out with a better camera and a multiple SIM card slot and really simple things that I think were available to anybody. But Chinese tech, in my experience, the entrepreneurs, especially when they're outside of China, they are really, really, really good at localizing. And that makes a huge difference because then people are able to use tools that are made for them and add on top of them. I think that's really exciting.
I don't know, Chuan, seeing those robots in the studio, I have a feeling that very soon they're going to come here, sit at this desk, read the prompter better,
take over our jobs,
ask better questions. But for now, we'll be manning this desk and pick up our conversation with Zun and Sean here in the studio. Zun, China included the AI Plus initiative in the government work report this year and says for the very first time that it supports the widespread application of large-scale models. How does that align with China's pursuit of new quality productive forces?
I think, obviously we saw in these packets as well, this application of very high tech in normal industries, it has positive implications, which I think, the world really needs. So one thing I was thinking about when we looked at AI Plus is that we have really seen a lot of long-term investment in education, in science and technology, in research and development. China is increasingly, improving these investments and also, setting an example for how to apply these investments. We see the productivity of many industries skyrocket. And let's also not forget that a lot of people 2-3 years ago thought that, okay, China's advantage was the population only. And then China, introduces the new quality productive forces that we are going to improve our productivity through high tech, through innovation. We are going to make sure that our people are key innovators on the local and the global front. So I think, AI Plus is definitely a good way to, wrap up or understand these core developments. Let's also remember that a lot of things, China is essentially about problem solving. And these new quality productive forces are not just about very high-level high-tech and robots, but their application in key spheres of normal life. So improving grain output, improving people's access to different resources, and also, again, creating an environment that's setting the bar higher globally and helping us resolve normal issues. So this is definitely, I think, a way to improve the reality of the world. And like you mentioned, Sean, that right now the economies, so to speak, that thought they were the ones who are much more advanced, they're looking at China and thinking we need to also have a long-term perspective, a vision. And this is one of China's biggest advantages. We're thinking 1 year, 5 years, 10-year plans, and they're building on thinking about the society as a whole.
And Sean, as a journalist, you've probably seen the influence of AI on many industries firsthand. You've reported on them. What are your thoughts on this trend? Are you concerned that AI is going to, take over our jobs one day?
In a way, it's kind of funny to laugh at that, ha, 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 but in a way, it's extremely true. And AI is going to take a lot of jobs away, but it is also going to create a lot of other jobs as well. And I think that that's one thing that we really can't lose sight of. And I think Zun is right when you talk about the 5-year plan. And China has these measures in place to build and build and build each year. And if you compare that and contrast with what the United States does, 4 years ago, its administration was aimed this way. Well, now it's completely 180 in the other direction. So they lose momentum in working on things such as AI. I know that the Trump administration has this great plan called Stargate, $100 billion. It came out, and then literally right after that, DeepSeek came out, and at a fraction of the cost could just do amazing things. And that had everybody in Silicon Valley jaws on the ground because people were wondering who's going to be the big competitor to the NVIDIA chip. Well, they found out with a very harsh slap in the face very quickly the way this is moving. So, AI it's just something. It makes life so easy. For example, coming here and covering 2 sessions, I sat in on some of the delegation meetings. The prepared remarks are in Mandarin, and they speak in Mandarin. And in the past, I would have been completely lost. But I could translate with WeChat instantly the documents and follow very carefully, and then use a program called iFlyTech, and it would translate the discussion, so I was able to monitor everything. So I think the question is how to control this. And a lot of countries, China at the top of the list, is saying it has to be done in a very responsible fashion. The last thing you want are like the deep fakes that are very scary out there and very easy to do. So even if every country on earth agrees to this except for one, it doesn't take much to really disrupt things. So AI is it's a force, but a force that needs to be harnessed.
We hope it could be a force of positive change. Sean, thank you. And Zoom, thank you so much for taking the time coming to the studio. Sean, we're going to come back to you in just a short while. But guys, stay with us. We're going to take a short break here on our special program, Global Lens, the two sessions. We'll be right back.
China's annual political season convenes at a critical juncture for advancing Chinese modernization. Deputies and political advisors gather in Beijing to outline this year's blueprint. Resilience and innovation. China is set to strengthen new quality productive forces for high-quality growth. Reform and opening up. China is further embracing business as unilateralism looms over the global economy. People-centered development and a shared future. China upholds true multilateralism for global peace and prosperity. Full coverage of the China agenda throughout the two sessions, only on CGTN.
Welcome back to CGTN special program on China's annual political season, Global Lens, the two sessions. On Friday, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi addressed a wide range of issues at a press conference on the sidelines of the two sessions here in Beijing.
That's right. And during the conference, Foreign Minister Wang Yi positioned China as a stabilizing force amid global uncertainty. And to get more insights, let me bring in our studio guest, Dr. Joseph Oliver Mendo, Deputy Director of the International Exchange Department at the China-Africa Business Council. Dr. Mendo, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
So let me get your take on China's diplomacy. What do you make of China's approach in navigating complex geopolitical landscape in 2025?
Okay, well, thank you for having me tonight. I think China took the coordination effort kind of approach, but also China took the finding similarities while sharing benefits and challenges as well, this kind of approach. And I think I will quote the Foreign Minister Wang Yi said, friends actually should be permanent, but benefits should be shared. So this in a row gives you, a glimpse of what Chinese foreign diplomacy is looking like. But also, on a personal note, I see an emerging troika of this kind of emerging forces, because you can see the SEO he mentioned that's going to happen in China. You can also see the G20, plus African Union now in South Africa, also the BRICS in Brazil. So you can see actually that China took a sort of approach that coordinate the policies, also forging this kind of consensus, this kind of approach. So I think, everything is rooted for China to kind of bring in or, put forward the global South, kind of engagement. I think this is, overall, this is what I got from the press conference of the Foreign Minister Wang Yi.
All right.
Wanting to be that stabilizer at a time of so many disruptions and uncertainties in this world, that is one tough job. And also, at the press conference, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China-U.S. business relations are based on two-way and reciprocal interactions, and China will take countermeasures in response to arbitrary pressure. Let's take a listen.
The United States should go over what has actually happened. What has it achieved from tariff and trade wars over the years? Has its trade deficit widened or narrowed? Has its manufacturing become more competitive or less competitive? Has U.S. inflation gone up or down? Has the life of its people gotten better or worse?
All right, Sean, let me get your take on this. President Donald Trump has imposed a 25% tariff on Mexico, Canada, and China. How are ordinary Americans, their lives impacted by tariffs? What would they say if asked about these kind of issues?
I think that they read the same reports that I do, and a lot of economists who are a lot smarter than me that said a tariff is nothing more than a tax. And eventually, we're all going to pay for this. It's not like it's going to pour money into U.S. coffers, into the U.S. Economy. I think a lot of people are very concerned about this because Donald Trump also has this whiplash method of how he imposes these tariffs. And you have to remember that Canada and Mexico are the two largest trading partners for the U.S. And secondly, they're among the closest allies. And the feeling, I think to a large degree, is why are we punishing our closest allies with tariffs how is this going to affect us? And we've already seen consumer confidence in the United States drop significantly. Now, Trump has blamed the Biden administration on that, but I think a lot of people are saying it's a little unfair to blame the Biden administration. You've been in power now close to 2 months. You're the one making these decisions. So it's frustrating. And you're talking about now a 250% tariff on dairy products from Canada. I mean, how could that even go into effect? There's just a lot of unknown, and bringing Elon Musk into the picture to basically redo how the United States government works. There's so much confusion right now. I think lawmakers are confused, so definitely people at home are confused, and they're worried about their wallets, and they're worried about their 401ks.
And in addition to these major country relationships, developing country ties are also another issue at the press conference. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also spoke about Global South cooperation. He said the Global South should strengthen themselves, stand together in unity, and strive for development.
Accounting over 40% of global GDP and contributing as high as 80% of global growth, the Global South is a key force for maintaining world peace, driving world development, and improving global governance. As the world is undergoing great transformation unseen in a century, historic changes are taking place in the East-West and South-North dynamics. The Global South holds the key to bringing stability to the world and making it a better place.
All right, let's dig a little deeper into this. Let me bring in Marco Fernandes, a geopolitical analyst with the Brazilian media outlet Brasil de Fato. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Now, we've just heard Foreign Minister Wang Yi stress the pivotal role of the Global South in maintaining world peace and development. What's your take on this message?
Well, first of all, Lee, thanks so much for having me here. Well, I think first of all, it's a very good timing for this declaration for Mr. Wang Yi, because I mean, as everybody was discussing, we are now in the middle of a very turbulent times, despite of the good results of the negotiations in Ukraine. But, you know, Trump is threatening so many countries right now: Panama, Mexico, China, Brazil, India, Denmark. So the world is really getting more unstable. And having a country like China, huge country like China, proposing stability and say, okay, we are reliable partners. So China now, it's a driving force of BRICS, it's a driving force of SCO, two of the major platforms of the Global South. And also China is now have a very important role, I think, in the next years, especially for the Global South, because our priorities in the Global South, it's first of all industrialization or reindustrialization in countries like Brazil. Renewable energy is a key question for us. And also, of course, the issue of technology. And now we have this deep-seek revolution. So I think China can play a major role in these three major priorities for the Global South. So, of course, the partnership between countries in Latin America, Africa, and Asia with China will be absolutely fundamental for us.
Mr. Fernandes, please stay with us. We're going to come back to you in just a short while. Thank you so much.
Let me also bring Joseph on this topic as well, because China and Africa see eye to eye on many issues, and especially when it comes to advancing the causes of the Global South as a community, China and Africa say, you know, we should make more efforts here. What will these efforts look like in 2025, and how do these very close ties between China and Africa mean for Global South?
Yeah, definitely. You should know that the Global South, I used to say, it's the global majority. So in that sense, you know, when we were talking about the Global South, we talk about almost 70% of the global population, 40% of the global economy. So solidifying China-Africa partnership is actually, you know, making contribution by ricochet to the Global South. And you also have to mention that China and Africa, when we talk about China-Africa cooperation, is having several institutionalized platforms. We talk about the Belt and Road Initiative. We talk about the FOCAC from China-Africa cooperation that happened last year. And a strong emphasis has been put into connectivity infrastructure, because these are one of African key issues. Also, environmental issues. I think just just tackling those issues is also already making a great contribution to the global south. When you see China as the biggest developing countries and Africa as the continent with the highest or the most, more developing countries, a continent regrouping more developing countries. So this is actually something that we're looking for. And from the African perspective, that's why we're also willing to keep hand in hand with China to push forward the global south.
Yeah, hopefully this cooperation, this partnership between China and African countries could serve as a catalyst to empower the global south.
Definitely.
Thank you. Now, the Chinese government has pledged to launch major projects to combat climate change and take a leading role in global climate governance in 2025. This commitment comes as scientists warn that climate change is accelerating the rise of global sea levels. Global warming is intensifying ice sheet and glacier melting, as well as ocean expansion. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change estimates that by 2050, global sea levels could rise by 15 to 30 centimeters on average. And this would directly impact nearly 1 billion people living in low-lying coastal areas. Small island nations and coastal states face the most immediate threats, while millions more will need to adapt to increased flooding, storms, erosion, and displacement.
China has helped Pacific Island nations bolster their resilience to climate change. Reporters from Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and Kiribati say China's efforts have brought tangible benefits.
China's pledge to deepen climate governance partnership offers a potential path forward. China's approach to climate cooperation, particularly its focus on large-scale infrastructure projects and also renewable energy solutions, they provide us with the tools that we need to address these challenges directly. So China's investment in solar, in hydro, and also in wind energy, for example, could be a game changer for Fiji. And as we move towards more sustainable energy solutions and also reduce our dependence on fossil fuels.
Collaborations with countries like China is very important in having mutual understanding and cooperation that is beneficial to communities affected on a daily basis. Collaboration in terms of technology and expertise, capacity building, and resources such as funding to mitigation and adaptation efforts, and empower local communities to overcome the challenges is also crucial to Papua New Guinea and other Pacific Island countries facing similar challenges.
China's commitment to deepening climate governance partnership with Pacific Islands nation is a welcome step in addressing the urgent challenge. China's partnership emphasizes tangible, large-scale projects such as resilient coastal infrastructure and solar energy initiatives, which directly support our adaptation and mitigation goals.
And let's come back to our guest, Marco Fernandes, a geopolitical analyst with the Brazilian media outlet Brasil de Fato. Mr. Fernandes, how do you think China's green economic transition is influencing the global timeline for carbon neutrality, and how can international cooperation advance this goal?
Well, John, nice to see you again. So, of course, China is the major player in all the efforts for the energy transition. And we know that right now, China produces more or less 80% of the global solar panels, 60% of wind turbines, and 70% of lithium batteries in the world. So, of course, China also is doing partnership with so many countries. And of course, also internally, China still has, as we know, this challenge of the transition between the coal-based energy to renewable energy. China is still using a bit more than 50%. But according to some estimations, China needs a commitment to peak carbon emission before 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. According to the Climate Action Tracker, China would help the world to cool down in between 0.2 and 0.3 degrees Celsius. This is China alone. But of course, China now is also doing a lot of partnerships with countries all around the world, not only in the global south, but even in some countries in the global north. And this, of course, will be absolutely fundamental for the planet to achieve its goals. Because as we are saying now in in the video, we are talking about something that is urgent. And I think one of the biggest concerns we have now is that there's no way for us to tackle this global issue without cooperation among all the countries in the world. And as we know, there is a lot of polarization growing, especially coming from United States and Europe in the last year. So this is, I think, is the major concern. If we don't sit together, the whole planet, United Nations, to negotiate, we're not going to achieve these goals. And a lot of people, 1 billion people, will suffer a lot in the next years.
Marco Fernandez, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for your expertise.
Thank you. Let's talk more about this. Dr. Mendel, so climate change remains one of the most pressing issues facing our global community. How are you looking at, the role that major powers should play in spearheading the effort, protecting our planet? And what's your assessment of China's contribution and commitments in this effort?
I think great powers, they do have an important role to play, especially because for me, I do think one of the greatest challenges is lack of coordination and collaboration. Because first of all, there should be collaboration among great powers when it comes to climate issues, but also there should be coordination between their policies and the place they are going to implement it to. Let's say, for example, in Africa, you're having this policy, there should be a synergy between the policy that you're bringing with what is happening on the ground. And that's actually, I think, one of their biggest responsibilities, because speaking from an African perspective, you all know climate injustice. As a continent, less than 5% we produce CO2 emission, worldwide. So I think this is now when China comes in, because I mentioned earlier institutionalized platform. I've been to several Chinese counties where I actually had a first-hand experience on how Chinese counties are actually working towards achieving a win-win situation between man and nature. And this gives a strong signal, a strong message to us African countries, because we're looking onto technology transfer. We're looking onto capacity building. Even if we're producing less, but we're also into the new energy kind of game. And I think you might have heard of the Africa Solar Bed for Green Development. This kind of initiative, even if you're producing less, but it is also giving us a picture that more and more Chinese businesses getting into African soil are actually willing to, abide by the local rules. Yeah, so this is actually, what I think in terms of, environmental protection.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mendel. Thank you, Sean. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this special program. We really, really appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Tran, there's only so much we can cover in 60 minutes, but China's 2 sessions are still very much underway. Stay with CGTN as we bring you comprehensive coverage of China's annual political season. With that, we come to the end of this special program on CGTN. I'm Zhong Shi.
I'm Li Qiuyuan. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.